But Cardano was built to be the digital nation.
Today I sit down with one of the leaders in cryptocurrency.
I can see a world where Cardano has an equivalent population to Bitcoin.
To discuss what's next for Cardano.
We have an on-chain treasury that's just opened up with 1.8 billion ADA in it. It's over $1 billion of value.
We discuss what's actually next for Bitcoin.
And you say Bitcoin this cycle you believe can get up to $250,000. You've said that before.
Yeah.
What drives that?
Watch today's whole video, click subscribe so you never miss conversations like this.
Give me a prediction on what we will see 1 year from now.
Well, first we'll be, sad that Vitalik retired after Cardano flipped it.
I present you my unfiltered conversation with Cardano founder Charles Hoskinson at the Rare Evo conference.
Co-founder of Cardano, Charles Hoskinson. Give it up.
What? Okay, so I would be remiss if I didn't give you a gift. Thank you so much for coming to Rare Evo. Many of you know I have more than one company. So we have input-output. We built things like Midnight through a company called Shielded. There's probably a dozen or so that are in the portfolio. But my brother and I, we started a company called HoskBrew. And very few people know about it because this is the first time we've publicly talked about it. But what HoskBrew does is it takes all that old stuff that we used to play when we were kids, Nintendo games, Super Nintendo games, Sega games. We buy them, we refurbish them, and we bring them back to market. So when I was a kid, this game came out in 1989. It was called Crystal Mines. Had a lovely blue cartridge, has over 100 levels, it's almost impossible to win, but God, it was a lot of fun. And we spent thousands of hours as children playing this game. So what we did was we had to hunt down who owned the game. We bought it, the intellectual property, and then we kind of cleaned it up a little bit, and then we actually manufactured it again. So since the first time since 1989, we did another production run. So we had to find an injection mold to make the Nintendo cartridge. We had to find a PCB manufacturer to actually make a board, and we cleaned up a lot of mistakes. For example, guys, remember when you played those games, you had to blow on the cartridges? Well, the reason why is because the pins in the back, they bend as you keep putting the cartridges in and out, and they lose contact. So when you blow on it, it forms like that spit that acts as a conductor and it allows you to play. Well, what if you just make it out of stronger metal? Then it doesn't bend, right? So we cleaned all that up. So allow me first to give you the original Crystal Mines.
Thank you.
But we're not done. We said, how about we actually make a sequel? How about that? Now, this is a terrible idea for a variety of reasons. A, because you complain about smart contract development on Cardano. Have you ever tried to write a Nintendo game? You have to write assembly code to write a Nintendo. You actually have to know what's in the damn registers. So we actually found this language called NES Fab. We found a developer of this language. Yes, it was a guy who created it. And we actually wrote a new video game. So we created a sequel to it, and launching here at Rare Evo is, for the first time since 1989, Crystal Mines Supernova.
Wow.
And here's that for you.
Charles, I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, and what's so cool about this game is that in addition to having a meat space physical version, we're going to have NFTs that are on stuff.io, because it's stuff. We love stuff. The stuff guys here. Where's Ben? Yeah, there's Ben. Hey! All right, so we're going to actually launch these on stuff, and Lace Wallet's going to have a Nintendo emulator for both the original Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, and we're going to continue to make new intellectual property for that, launching it on stuff and deployed on the Cardano network. So just a little side thing. I wanted you to have that. And
Charles, I want to challenge you next year in Rare Evo.
Okay.
All right, it's on. You guys are all here. You'll remember. As we dig into this conversation, and Cardano does so much, it's always been focused on peer-reviewed, research-driven building of the blockchain. As the largest financial market goes all in on cryptocurrency, how does that approach give Cardano an edge?
Well, the biggest part is Bitcoin DeFi. When you look at Ethereum, Solana, Sui, all these other guys, they've done a phenomenal job building, growing, capturing a very large market. That market's about $200 billion of TVL. It's growing rapidly. But at the same time, it's not growing parabolically. It's not like it was 100 billion, then 200 billion, then 400 billion, and it's year by year just doubling. It's starting to slow down a little bit. They've kind of reached a bit of a ceiling. However, you've noticed that Bitcoin has grown dramatically. We've gone from 25,000 to about 110,000. There's a sovereign wealth fund concept of Bitcoin coming in. The US government's going to hold over 200,000 Bitcoin. And a lot of big institutions like the BlackRocks are really embracing it. And they're saying, well, we want to deploy our Bitcoin and get a yield. We want a DeFi. We want lending. We want asset issuance. We want NFTs. We want metaverses. So they want all those various things. So strategically, when we looked at the growth of Cardano, we're kind of looking in two directions at the same time. One is the Bitcoin DeFi direction, where we think we can be the place for that to happen. The other direction that we're looking at is the midnight direction. You'll see that lovely midnight booth, where we're talking a lot about bringing computational privacy to the entire space. And one of the reasons why Polkadot and Solana and these others are here is that they're actually included in that. For the first time ever, Solana is now part of the Cardano story. Polkadot is part of the Cardano story. So this concept of hybrid apps, this idea of economics that are cooperative, these concepts allow people to write smart contracts on midnight and pay in the currency that they want. So you can pay in Sol, you can pay in Ether, you can pay in Bitcoin. So it feels like an extension of your infrastructure, and very much so. And that's going to bring a ton of applications in for real-world apps, regulated DeFi, medical records, all these things that live in the real world, but haven't touched crypto yet because they don't have the privacy or selective disclosure capabilities.
Bitcoin DeFi, obviously huge. What is the general timeline for that? Is that by end of the year or by the end of 2026?
Well, parts are already here, like the non-fungible components. And when you look at the question of, well, how do you get it out? It's more of a question of, well, what trade-offs are you prepared to make? So you can always build a bridge. Wrap Bitcoin has existed for a long time, but Bitcoin DeFi in its purest form requires three properties, as I mentioned this morning. Only Bitcoin, so only Bitcoin can provide the security. You pay your transaction fees in Bitcoin, you get your yield back in Bitcoin. Cardano has built under the hood many native features for this, and what we're doing now is we're working to make them really easy to use, really secure, really fast, and just great user experience. The concept of the toggle. And this is not something that would just stay in Cardano. We want to bring the DeFi toggle to blockchain.com and bitcoin.com and brave.com and these others, 110 million users, where you just sit there, you have your Bitcoin in, you click the toggle, and you go from Bitcoin to Bitcoin DeFi mode. And then suddenly an app store opens up, and you see all these different things you can do with it, and you click those things, and you get yield, you do something. And then when you're done, you know what you do? You unclick the toggle, and you're back to Bitcoin. That's the simplicity that's really required for this to be where it needs to be. So if I had to hazard a guess, I think these experiences will start come online towards the end of the year to next year, and they're going to get really good next year. And then within the 3 to 5 year horizon, the TVL of Bitcoin DeFi will be larger than the market cap of Ethereum and Solana combined.
Charles, I was talking to some of the audience at this conference, huge amount of people, and we were talking about, you were on record that Bitcoin the network may grow 10x larger than it is from where it is today, but Cardano can anywhere from 100 to 1000x.
Yeah, and that was one of those interviews where they're asking a hypothetical, and there's greater growth potential for products like Cardano and ecosystems like Cardano because of size, scope, and scale and vision than something like in a Bitcoin. And also Bitcoin being a multi-trillion-dollar asset, if you 10x an asset like that, you're now worth more than all the gold in the world. You're starting to get to a ceiling there. So its growth journey is by necessity and scale going to start slowing down. But I do believe we will live in a world of $1 million Bitcoin. I think it'll happen. It's hard to say when. I don't think this cycle. I think we'll probably cap out around 250,000. But I think inevitably over the next 10, 20, 30 years, we will see that day where there's $1 million Bitcoin. But Cardano was built to be the digital nation. It covers the economic, political, and social systems of the world. We have an on-chain governance. We have voting systems. We can build social networks. We're fully programmable. And also we're the crossroads of all these amazing things, especially with the partner chains portfolio. So while gold is important, gold is not a nation state. Gold is a value store and carrier, and it's a very important thing to create sound money, but it's not an end unto itself. Whereas Cardano is a destination. And if we continue to invest and thrive and grow, I can see a world where Cardano has an equivalent population to Bitcoin. We're 4.3 million people. I could see 550 million or more in Cardano. Now, who the hell knows? Will that take 5 years, 10 years, 10 years? Doesn't matter, because it's not slowing down. Every year after year, we go from a small to larger to larger to larger. Some years the growth rate slows down. Some years the growth rate speeds up, usually bull or bear. But we don't give up people. It's not like we're dying. We've been in the top 10 for over 10 years, and we don't slow down as an ecosystem. We speed up. So the fact that we now have on-chain governance, we have the DREPs, the Constitutional Committee, we have an on-chain treasury that's just opened up with 1.8 billion ADA in it. It's over $1 billion of value. We have a constitution. We had a constitutional convention. And the DevX of Cardano has become exponentially easier. And we're able to launch great projects like Midnight, for example, out of Cardano. That's not going to stop. It's only going to increase. And every time we do it, we gain people and we keep our people because they love the ecosystem. They love the culture.
Besides Bitcoin DeFi and besides partner chains, because I would say those are two of the biggest, most important things to focus on that differentiate Cardano. Besides those things, what are one or two other things that you believe are dire for the Cardano community to focus on in the next few years?
Well, we got to fix broken windows, and that's why Midnight was such a great project, because Cardano was a bit of a mystical island that nobody ever wanted to go and visit, And what Midnight did is it fixed the broken windows. So we got all these custodians to integrate, all these wallets to integrate, exchanges start caring about it, especially the native assets on it. And we need to fix things like get better stablecoin support and get better Oracle support and these types of things. But those will happen. They're organic and natural, and eventually we will get there. The other side of it is that we have to start getting some real-world products into the Cardano ecosystem, like reinsurance products, lending products, especially microfinance products. There's some real-world touch points that you see here at this event that if we continue to invest and grow are going to be very exciting, like that vending machine we have right over there. That vending machine is connected to the Hydra network. So when you tap your phone and get a Louis Vuitton purse out of it or get a laptop out of it, which, by the way, it is in there. You can get a purse or a laptop, so you should check it out. That vending machine is a proof of concept for point of sale. So that's every ATM, that's every cash register, and that's every vending machine in the world could be engaged with that. Instant feeless. That's something that's Cardano exclusive with Hydra. We will connect one day Hydra to Lightning Network through a technology called Thundercloud. So when you look 3 to 5 years, you say, okay, we're covering the whole banana. We're talking about real world transactions in real life. Tap your phone, it just works. It's instant and feeless. That's perfect for the stablecoin world and every sale event. We're talking about intellectual property. You look at the Stuff.io model. As that continues to grow and thrive, that's going to bring all these things and create a world where you as an author, when you distribute your book, you're distributing a book as if it's a physical book, but in a digital, and the buyer owns that copy. Amazon can't show up and just take it out of your Kindle. You have all this depend stuff that people are talking about, like Iagon, for example, which is decentralized storage, and we're adjacent with World Mobile, and they're still floating around doing interesting things, and that's an idea of building a decentralized cell phone network. So watching those things grow, transform into real-world assets, enter the real world and be usable on your phone, that's the mile that we're looking for, and we're getting it done. We know the base technologies, we know the user experience, and the ecosystem is moving very quickly for that.
When I think of decentralized, I think of Bitcoin and Cardano, two of the most decentralized networks in crypto. But if you were king and you could snap your fingers and do whatever you wanted, how would you stimulate the DeFi and stablecoin ecosystem?
Well, the stablecoin ecosystem was a bit curtailed because we had an unorthodox model. First, it's hard for an EVM system to be natively UTXO compatible, but those will get resolved soon enough. Second, how it works with normal cryptocurrencies is the governing foundation has a big pile of money. They pay an integration fee, and then they go mint $300-400 million as a stablecoin, and they trade with it. that doesn't work in our ecosystem for a variety of reasons. So the good news is we have an on-chain treasury, and it can be utilized for these types of things, and there's a proposal on the table for it. And the good news is we also have a lot of homegrown options like USDM and USDA and others that if we invest in and we build up, it will bridge the gap and kind of walk a ladder to Circle and Tether like instruments getting into our ecosystem. So it is something we deeply care about at Input Output, and we've done a lot from strategic investments to mentoring and working with some of these different entities, to also just having conversations with the big guys about what that ladder walking is going to look like, as well as putting our support behind the Cardano Sovereign Wealth Fund concept to move some of the treasury in from ADA into stablecoins to kind of prime that pump and get that distribution that we need. The other thing is it's not good enough just to have stablecoin, you have to pair it with yield products. So where do you get the lending? Where do you get the RWA? So Midnight's going to bring a ton of RWAs into the Cardano orbit because of the privacy capability and the selective disclosure and compliance capabilities of it. Because almost all these RWAs, they look, act, or are securities. And securities require broker-dealers and disclosure regimes and segregated markets and these types of things. Well, having computational privacy, which is what Midnight does, it gives you the ability to do that. And then suddenly, all this Cardano stuff is now adjacent to a large RWA set, so you have yield products waiting for those stable coins to exist. But here's the most interesting part. Bitcoin DeFi, by its existence, creates a ton of stable coins. And here's how. You have Bitcoin. The silent rule number 4 about Bitcoin is Bitcoiners don't want to sell their Bitcoin. Hold Bitcoin. Don't sell your Bitcoin. Always hodl. Well, how do you participate in DeFi if you don't sell your Bitcoin? You lend it. So you lend the Bitcoin, turns into a stable coin, deploy the stable coin somewhere. So there's a very strong virtuous circle where Bitcoin coming into the Cardano orbit would use DeFi applications to lend to a stable coin, deploy a stable coin to these yield products, get a yield paid back in Bitcoin, and then go back to Bitcoin when they're all said and done. So I think that circuit, if we invest in that circuit as an ecosystem, we make it friction-free, organically as we get Bitcoin TVL, we also at the same time get stablecoin TVL. And that can be billions of dollars, if it's done correctly. So I'm really excited about that, and it's great for Bitcoiners because they never have to sell their Bitcoin. They can keep their underlying asset.
And you say Bitcoin this cycle you believe can get up to $250,000. You've said that before.
Yeah.
What drives that? And does this cycle end at the end of the year or into 2026?
2026, and the inventories are just too low. I mean, everybody's buying it. You have all these DATs, and you have these sovereign funds and other people, and there's just not enough Bitcoin being produced. So it's a supply and demand mechanic. And if you take a look at the buy volume in the Wall Street demand that's coming, there's just simply put not enough Bitcoin to go around. So if you look at the models, it's somewhere in that 150 to 300,000, and the expected value kind of sits around that 250 mark. And we've already achieved a great deal. And what's nice is once Bitcoin stalls, then people are like, I'm not getting enough love in Bitcoin. So then it leaks into the alts. So that's what creates the GigaChad bull run for that. And I think the big push is going to be the Clarity Act being passed. And that'll probably be passed around September to October. And then once that's in market, the Mag 7 will come in, other people will come in, and everybody will just start taking a little bit of crypto in their treasury management in the Fortune 500. And these are trillion-dollar companies, and so by extension, that demand is just simply put too high. The driver for Bitcoin DeFi is if all these large institutions hold Bitcoin, they're going to want, as a CFO, to create yield for that. They just don't want to have an opportunity cost of holding an asset that's passive and doesn't do anything. So if somebody comes to them and says, you can click this toggle and work with a third-party treasury management firm and get 5 or 6% like a T-bill on your Bitcoin at a relatively low risk, they'll be like, yeah, I'll do that for 20 or 30% of my inventory. And maybe that's $200 million or $300 million. Sum that across the whole Fortune 500, that's a TVL of probably 50 to 100 billion just off of that. So the numbers work very well for Bitcoin.
I understand for this next question, you have no control of this, but do you expect we'll see Cardano treasury companies, and is that something you would like to see?
It's inevitable, but I'll have more to say in a bit.
Interesting. Charles, when you are alone at the end of the day, just you, what keeps you up at night? What are you scared of?
Flying cobras. I think the biggest issue is when you're a CEO in a technology space, you're haunted by two things: the things that you miss and the bets you make. So when you look at technology, there's 26 ways you can do everything. You know, it's like trying to put your pants on 26 different ways. Eventually you figure it out. And you at some point have to make a bet, you know, and zero knowledge. Do I bet on elliptic curves, hashes, or lattices? So am I a snark man, am I a lattice man, or am I an elliptic curve man? And if you bet right, you have a multi-billion-dollar product. If you bet wrong, no one uses your technology and it falls apart. So every single thing in the roadmap is a collection of trade-offs and bets. And I sweat at night thinking, did we make the right bet? And we don't know. We won't know for 3 to 5 years. The things you miss are where your imagination wasn't broad enough and you just basically got the market wrong. You're like, oh, shit, actually everybody's doing this thing instead of this other thing. So there's been numerous times where we assumed the market would behave a certain way, or we assumed some things would be a certain way. Like Solana is a great example of this, where they had this big surge, FTX happened, they burst and collapsed down, but they caught the meme coin wave. And none of us in the industry were really thinking too much about it. We're like, well, yeah, we've seen meme coins. It's kind of like NFTs and Dogecoin. We didn't really take meme coins that seriously for the most part. Even Ethereum really didn't. And then suddenly, all these meme coins come on Solana, which brought tens of millions of users in. It brought enormous amounts of volumes in, and it recovered the market cap, and it rebuilt the ecosystem. And it was the lifeline that they needed to revitalize, and it gave them that bridge to become a legit DeFi platform. Now, we could have invested heavily in meme coin mania and, you know, done all these things and, you know, built some meme coin products, you know, Charles with hat or something like that. I mean, there was Nike, he's a good pig. But it wasn't something we took as seriously as we needed to, and that's a failure to imagine, you know, where these things can come. So as a CEO in a technology space, you always are straddling those two things. What did you miss, and what did you bet on that may not be the right bet? Now, even if you bet perfectly, and even if you don't miss anything, you can still mistime the market. That's the third thing that is always challenging. So mistiming is like Steve Ballmer is the greatest example in the history of technology. Ballmer knew the iPhone, something like it, was going to be awesome. But when he put all the models together, they were betting 2009. Why? Because that was their anticipation for 3G. That was when the programmability was going to be where it was at. That's where the price point was going to be around $200 to $250. He didn't understand that Steve Jobs had this MacGuffin where he convinced AT&T to upgrade their network faster and make 2007 instead of 2009. And also business model innovation, where a $600 phone would be subsidized by the cell phone seller to be a $250 phone. You see, so because he didn't have those two facts and those two imaginations, he mistimed the market. So you always have to know, when is the market going to be ready for this thing? And Bitcoin DeFi is a great example of that. A lot of people like Rootstock, they bet early, very long time ago, and they mistimed it. I actually experienced this with my career. I created BitShares before Ethereum with Dan Larimer. We were the first algorithmic stablecoin, and we were the first DEX back in 2013. Nobody cared because there was no DeFi market. But look at Uniswap today. Look at MakerDAO, which some of the MakerDAO guys ended up being BitShares guys. They started from that community. So we mistimed the market. We were too early. Ethereum was perfectly timed. EOS was too late to the market for the model that it was in. It had BitShares been EOS, BitShares would have dominated and won. So as a CEO, you always look at that timing, the failure to imagine, and the bets that you got wrong.
Charles, final question, and then before we both leave, I want to grab a picture with you on stage.
Sure.
But you and me, we're on stage 1 year from now in Rare Evo. Give me a prediction, whether it's Bitcoin DeFi or partner chain, something a little specific on what we will see 1 year from now.
Well, first we'll be, you know, sad that Vitalik retired after Cardano flipped it. The internet's going to have fun with that one. But levity aside, I want to win, damn it. Levity aside, Midnight will be launched. The partner chains ecosystem will be very fertile and more will be on the way. Bitcoin DeFi will be operating in some capacity and integrated in multiple wallets A lot of great new products. The TVL will be significantly higher on Cardano. The DevX will be significantly better on Cardano. It will be a Plus V4. We'll be working towards Leos and getting that turned on. Hydra will be entering its second generation. But overall, it'll just be a much smoother ecosystem and a much more consumer-friendly ecosystem and balanced ecosystem overall. And hopefully, we can be talking about all these next-gen apps and how successful they are and how they're all listed on exchanges. And everybody's like, wow, Cardano is so cool, and there's a sexy kid again. And so that's what we'll be talking about.
I love it. Charles Hoskinson, everybody. Give it up.
Thank you, guys.